Well, let's take a look here. We're starting chapter 14, and we devote the whole chapter to blood. Blood is critical. Blood is critical for human anatomy. Blood has a lot of functions, and the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look, and we want to say, okay, if we were to take a bottle of blood out, and we were to centrifuge this blood and spin it really fast, and get it to where the heavier components of the blood goes down and the lighter components goes up. That's what we actually do to separate blood out. We take this test tube and we spin this blood. What happens is the bottom layer of this, okay, is the red blood cells. Then we get a little bitty layer here called the buffy coat, and then the rest of it is plasma. So let's look at what's in here, okay? The red blood cells, when I talk about percents here, I'm going to talk about the percent of the buffy coat and the red blood cells. So in the rest of the buffy coat and the red blood cells, 95.1% is red blood cells. So 95.1% is red blood cells. So if somebody has a particular blood, well, we all have a blood type, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. If your type is A, B, AB, or O, whatever blood type you have, that is all found in the area here in the red blood cells. So we centrifuge. Why do we even centrifuge down blood? We centrifuge blood down because whenever somebody donates blood, we don't have to keep the plasma and we don't have to keep the buffy coat. However, sometimes we can because sometimes we need that. Sometimes somebody needs blood plasma. That's a whole different deal. Or somebody needs certain white blood cells. As a matter of fact, a bunch of cancer research now is found in the buffy coat when we find that somebody has had a certain type of cancer, has a certain type of white blood cell to fight against that particular cancer. We're actually pulling that out of their buffy coat. It's really cool. So blood it's a fun topic. It's an interesting topic. 95% of this small area here are the red blood cells. So that's all of the red blood cells. Once again, remember that the shape of a red blood cell, if we look at the side of it, is actually bent in. Okay, it gives it a lot of surface area, and this is where the red blood cell actually attaches to the hydrogen. I'm sorry, it attaches to the oxygen, making the hemoglobin. Okay, we'll talk about hydrogen later in the gases in the buffy coat. But this is where it attaches to the oxygen and makes hemoglobin. So the red blood cells, 95% of this solid on the bottom, that's our actual red blood cells. So what we do is when somebody goes in and donates blood, they centrifuge that blood off and they pull off all the plasma, and this is what they put in the bags. They actually just take the red blood cells. Isn't that interesting? So we have a small amount, and now we have a very small area. As you can tell, the plasma itself is the biggest part of the blood. Now, plasma is a straw-colored liquid. It's the liquid part of the blood. So what's in the plasma? The plasma contains water, electrolytes, proteins, waste, nutrients, and gases. So that's in the plasma part of the blood. Now, once again, when we centrifuge this blood out, we see the three, but when the blood is flowing through the system, the plasma, the white blood cells, the red blood cells, they all flow together. Although we can see the straw-colored liquid in there, and we can see the red blood cells moving through there, we can't see the white blood cells as well, or the platelets, but we literally see the red blood cells moving through this plasma. So let's continue to talk about the significance of these. So the red blood cells, that's what we actually have to have. And we could actually add water to our system and make the plasma, okay? We can actually add the water, the electrolytes. Once again, we'll talk about a lot of different things. We're really getting into some cool stuff into this class. But whenever we give somebody an IV, okay, and we give them water in their system, we also give them these things that are in the plasma. We give them electrolytes, proteins, nutrients. So somebody that is almost dehydrated, that is getting an IV, we might say it's a D5W ringer, which means it has dextrose in it, okay, which is the sugar that's the food, and it also is giving them the electrolytes. But where are we putting this IV? It's intravenous. We're putting it directly into the bloodstream. So you say, no, wait a minute. Now what's happening here? We're putting this IV directly into the bloodstream. So are we putting more blood in the bloodstream? No. What we're doing is we're putting in the plasma. Oh, okay. So what happens is all of these items, okay, all of these items that are in the plasma, they're critical for us to have, but they're things we take in, okay? They don't have to do with our blood type. These are things that we take in that we need in our blood. So when we give somebody, if somebody could even be in a coma and actually not eat anything, even for months, and we can actually feed them intravenously, okay? Because what happens is, whenever we take in food and the stomach breaks it all down, what we're eventually going to do is we're going to break these down into water-soluble products that can actually be absorbed into the bloodstream. So what are they absorbed into in the bloodstream? The plasma, this plasma part of the blood. Okay, everybody kind of follow on that? That's kind of interesting. So we've got three different things here. We've got the plasma that contains the electrolytes, the proteins, the waste, the nutrients, and gases. Things that we want to get in our system and things that we want to get out of our system. Okay? So for example, the blood also can have the waste that we want to get out of our system in the blood that's going to be screened out later through other organs. Okay? So the plasma has good stuff in it. The plasma also has bad stuff in it that we're trying to get out later or we're trying to put into the cells. So there's the plasma. It's kind of cool. Water, electrolytes, proteins, waste, nutrients, and gases. And then here's the red blood cells. Now, what's the purpose of the red blood cells? They have one purpose, and their purpose is to carry oxygen. So we have oxygenated blood that goes through the arteries, and then we have deoxygenated blood that goes through the veins. And then the veins, then we get more oxygen back in the blood, okay, and creating these red blood cells viable again. So now we have this beautiful red color. It's actually kind of a duller red. Actually, I said beautiful. It's important because it's a red color. And then the bluer color are these same blood cells without the oxygen makes them appear bluer, which is basically the color of what we show the color for veins. So once again, we're looking at the components of blood. Red blood cells. What's the purpose? Carry oxygen. That's the purpose. Carry oxygen. Blood types. We'll come in and talk about that later. That's all determined in the red blood cells. We can take a centrifuge, pull off the red blood cells, and actually give people that need blood just the red blood cells. It's amazing. Because then we can add the plasma in there in the form of water, electrolytes, proteins. We can actually do that intravenously. Okay? We can put that directly in there, and it will mix with the blood and make this straw-colored transportation fluid that will that will allow the red blood cells to travel throughout the body. Now, it's kind of ironic, okay, the one part we haven't talked about is what we call this buffy coat. It's called a buffy coat because of the color that it makes between the two. It's kind of a light brown color. The buffy coat, when I talk about not the plasma so much, okay, but the red blood cells in the buffy coat, okay, in this area from here to here, once again, remember 95.1% are red blood cells. 4.8%, okay, 4.8% are platelets. Wow. 4.8% of this area between here, these are platelets. What do platelets do? Platelets come in and allow your blood to be able to clot. You get a cut, you get a scratch, you have a major wound, and the platelets come in and they form this fibrinogen. We'll talk about blood clotting a little bit later. And they come in and they form your blood to be able to clot. So 4.8% of that area, okay, between the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets, you have 4.8% platelets. Wow. And that only leaves of 95.1% red blood cells, 4.8% platelets, that only leaves 0.1% for white blood cells. Now, white blood cells are where we found something in our system, and we'll talk about antigens later. The white blood cells is our immune system. The white blood cells go and they find and they destroy stuff throughout our body, and they travel in the blood. So the white blood cells are very, very minimal compared to the red blood cells and the platelets, but extremely critical. Because once we find a foreign particle in the blood, then the white blood cells go and they attack it and they actually destroy. Many times they encapsulate it, take it into the blood, and then we filter it out through the kidneys, or we filter it out through another organ. We'll talk about how we get rid of toxic materials in our body. But those white blood cells seek and destroy foreign materials. Now, some of the white blood cells you're born with, some of the white blood cells you access. So when I get a shot, okay, when I get a shot, sometimes I'm actually getting new white blood cells, but most of the time what I'm doing is I'm putting something out of my system. Like like you get a shot for measles, so I'm putting the measles organism out here in my body, okay, and then all of a sudden the white blood cells sense that that's out there, and then in that part of the blood, now once again when I talk about buffy coat, that's just when it's centrifuged, but in that part of the blood, those white blood cells that fight off the measles, they start to grow. And as they grow, then they're in the blood looking to search out and destroy whatever foreign particles they have. So once again, it's really interesting. Remember, we're just doing components of the blood on this first video. The red blood cells, that's your actual blood cells, once again, that have this shape to it, that carry the oxygen. That's where you get your blood type. We often centrifuge off just the red blood cells when we give somebody blood. We don't usually give them the plasma, and we don't usually give them the buffy coat. The buffy coat in the middle, what is it? White blood cells and platelets. Extremely critical for clotting and extremely critical for fighting off disease. And then what's the biggest part of the blood? The liquid part of the blood. Imagine if most of our blood was red blood cells, we would have a hard time with our blood flowing and moving throughout our body. But instead, plasma is about, and I don't want to give you an exact percentage because plasma can actually change, okay? We can actually be more hydrated than other times, but plasma constitutes most of the blood. It's a straw-colored liquid. Once again, it has water, electrolytes, proteins, waste, nutrients, and gases. So blood is critical. Blood is how we get oxygen to our cells. It's how we remove carbon dioxide from our system. It's also how we put food in all the cells of our body. And all the main blood vessels that we have go off into little capillaries that do the same work for all the different parts of the body. So blood, a critical chapter, critical component. So this first video, we're just simply looking at the different components of blood as if we were to centrifuge them down. So once again, the red blood cells, the buffy coat of the white blood cells, the platelets, and then of course the plasma, which contains the water, electrolytes, proteins, waste, nutrients, and gases. So I'll see you on the next video, and we'll keep talking about blood.